Hello everyone, it's Miss LaChance back again with another read aloud video. Today we will be reading chapters 61 through 65 of our summer read aloud book, The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. Chapter 61 is called The Guide, so without any further ado, I'll try not to talk too much in the beginning of this video. I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right into chapter 61. A light drizzle was falling on the travelers, although they weren't actually traveling at the moment. They were standing still and staring up at a steep mountain of rocks. The robot had plenty of rock climbing experience, but one bad fall out there, and she would be stranded forever. So Roz carefully picked her way up the slippery slope while Brightbill fluttered along beside her. They hadn't gone far when there came the sound of hooves clattering on stone, and then a horned creature leaped from the mist and smashed right into the robot. Clang! Roz went flying backward. Clang! Roz crashed onto the ground. Standing on the rocks above the robot was a wild ram. He had big, curling horns and a crazed look in his eyes. Brightbill flew to his mother's side, ready to defend her. "Stay away from my mama," he hissed, spreading his wings. But rather than charging, the ram hung his head and started to cry. "Oh, I'm so sorry," he blubbered. "I don't want to hurt anyone. Sometimes I just lose control and smash things. I feel awful about it. Really, I do." Roz brushed herself off. "I believe those are your instincts," she said. "We all have them. They can be very powerful. I only hope your instincts do not end up breaking me." "Don't worry," the ram sniffled. "I'll try not to let my instincts break you." "I appreciate that," said the robot. "My name's Thud," said the ram. "Which way are you headed?" "We are trying to find our way out of these mountains," said Roz, "but they never seem to end." "You're almost there," said Thud. "Let me show you the way. It's the least I can do after smashing you." The ram pranced away and led our friends to a narrow path that wound up the rocky mountainside. Roz tried to stay close, but Thud was born to climb. He easily scrambled up the steep slopes and vanished into the mist. A minute later, his friendly voice called out, "For a creature without hooves, you're not a bad climber." And there he was, peering down from the cliff ledge. The path opened into a foggy meadow where a whole flock of wild sheep were grazing. They reminded Roz of the cows grazing in the pasture, and she wondered how Hilltop Farm was doing without her. Thud pranced through the flock. "These are my new friends," he announced without stopping. "They're lost, so I'm guiding them out of the mountains." The sheep raised their heads. Thud had a habit of making weird friends, but these two were definitely the weirdest. The flock watched as the ram, the robot, and the goose continued up the mountain and disappeared into the mist. Higher and higher they climbed above the tree line to where there were only rocks and scrubby plants and trickling mountain streams. They occasionally came upon a dirt road or a hiking trail, and the ram trotted across casually, while our friends crept across cautiously. At one point, the ram got that crazed look in his eyes again. His horns came flying at the robot, and she jumped out of the way just in time. Then Thud cried and apologized for his instincts. Roz forgave him, and the group carried on. They finally hiked up from the mist and onto a mountain ridge. Above, the sky was clear. Below, a blanket of puffy clouds spread outward in every direction. The sun was setting and the western clouds were burning pink. What do you think that means? The western clouds were burning pink. What might the sky look like if the western clouds were burning pink? What do you think this example of figurative language means here? Go ahead and comment below if you think you might know what that means. And here on page 178, we have a picture of them on the ridge of the mountain. We have Thud guiding our robot friend Roz and Brightbill past the mountains. Roz thought of the mountaintop on her island. If only she could be watching the sunset from the peak instead of this one. So if you guessed what it meant for the western clouds to be burning pink, and if you guessed a sunset, you would be correct here. But they still had a long, long way to go. Thud pointed our friends to one last path. This will take you down from the mountains and through the foothills, he said, smiling. The ram suddenly got that crazed look in his eyes again, and the robot prepared to jump. But this time, Thud pulled himself together. He said goodbye to the travelers, and then he pranced away. And chapter 62 is called The Showdown. Daybreak in the foothills and thick gray fog was everywhere. With such poor visibility, the travelers relied on their other senses. They smelled salty air, they felt sandy soil, they heard seagulls screeching and waves breaking, and then they heard the long, low note of a ship's horn. Somewhere in the distance, hidden by the fog, was the ocean. As if to answer the ship, there came another long, low note. But it wasn't a horn, it wasn't a howl. A wolf was following our friends. Brightbill beat his wings and squawked, "Mama, run!" Roz ran downhill deeper into the gloom. Her feet stomped the sandy soil, leaving behind a trail of footprints. There was no time to hide her tracks, so she just kept running. Blurry shapes faded in and out of the fog, and her eyes darted around to see if there were rocks or bushes or wolves. But the robot should have watched where she was going. She slipped and thumped into the sand, and before she could get up, Shadow was on top of her. The wolf was heavy and strong. He pinned Roz to the ground and locked his teeth onto her tool belt. At last, he had caught his prey. Violently, wildly, he thrashed the robot from side to side. Roz tried to squirm free, but Shadow's grip was tight. There was only one thing to do. She reached down beside the wolf's snarling jaws and fumbled with the buckle, and suddenly she was loose. Shadow staggered backward, the belt dangling from his mouth as Roz stomped away. Brightbill had been circling overhead this whole time, and now he squawked desperate warnings to his mother. "Look out for those rocks! Shadow is gaining in on you! There are buildings ahead!" Roz burst through the row of hedges and onto the main street of a seaside village. It was still early and it was still foggy, and Roz was halfway through the village before anyone saw her. A man had just left for his morning walk when the robot and the wolf came galloping down the street. The man decided his walk could wait, and he hurried back inside. Shadow swiped at Roz's heels, but the robot leaped away. She soared over a house and landed on the other side. The wolf dashed around the yard, only to see her leaping away once more. This time, Roz landed in shallow water. Waves gently sloshed against her ankles. The robot backed into the ocean, up to her waist, and then automatically stopped. Her survival instincts wouldn't let her go any farther. "There's nowhere left to run," Shadow growled as he prowled onto the beach. "Either fight or swim." Roz was trapped. Her body lurched forward and backward as her computer brain struggled to find an escape. And then Brightbill came to her rescue. "This way, Mama!" Roz didn't hesitate. She launched herself up from the shallows toward her son's voice. Salt water streamed off her body as she soared through the air. Then her feet pounded into the sand beside Brightbill, who was perched atop an old rowboat. By the time Shadow arrived, our friends were rowing away from shore. The wolf's face twisted with rage, and he howled from the water's edge. "You made a fool out of me, Roz. My pack and my mate have left me. Now I'm just a worthless lone wolf, all because of you." It seems like Shadow here is eager to place the blame all on Roz. I think he really should be asking himself what part he played in all of this madness. Roz felt sorry for Shadow. She never meant for any of this to happen. But she had her own troubles. The robot's greatest fear was deep water, and now she was paddling through the waves and out to sea. Chapter 63 is called The Rowboat. The sun was shining, the fog was thinning, the robot was rowing. Roz was no thief, and she didn't like taking that old rowboat, but judging from its appearance, it had been abandoned years ago. She hoped it wouldn't be missed. Anyone who's rowed one of these boats knows you're supposed to face backward. That can make it tough to see where you're going. This wasn't a problem for Roz, however. She started off rowing normally, and after several strokes of the oars, her head spun around until she was facing forward. And what she saw was blue sky and dark waves, and a silver of green in the horizon. "We're in a bay," said Brightbill, swooping down into the boat. "To the north is that distant coastline. To the east is open water. To the west is a seaport, and to the south is the village and the wolf." It seemed the travelers had no choice but to cross the bay. Luckily, Roz could row long and fast. Brightbill settled in for the ride, and the robot's mechanical muscles started pumping. She pulled and pulled and pulled on the oars, and the robot glided through the waves. Roz was nervous. Time and again, the robot's survival instincts had stopped her from going into deep water. Now, an old rowboat was all that separated her from the murky depths. She couldn't wait to feel solid ground beneath her feet again. As they rowed deeper into the bay, the waves got larger and rougher. Gigantic swells of water rolled in from the open ocean and started tossing the boat around like a toy. The waves finally became too much for Brightbill. He spread his wings, lifted up on the breeze, and anxiously looked at the choppy surf ahead. "Row faster!" he squawked. "I don't know how much more the boat can take." Roz tried to power through. She rowed faster and faster until the boat was skimming across the water. Too fast. The left oar snapped, then the right, and suddenly the boat was at the mercy of the waves. "Hold on, Mama!" cried the goose. "Here comes a big one." Here we have a picture of Brightbill flying in the air, looking down and scouting out for danger for his mother. And Roz is on the rowboat here. Looks like she's trying her hardest to stay dry, but those big waves look like they could cause some trouble. The rowboat was pulled up the side of a towering wall of water. It teetered at the top, and then the boat went crashing down the other side with such force that the whole thing splintered apart. Roz felt water surging up around her. She clung to debris and kicked her legs, but she wouldn't stay afloat for long. The robot began to sink. The goose floated above. The ocean rolled and sloshed. Then there was a sudden burst of air from somewhere nearby. Brightbill looked toward the noise, but only saw sea spray drifting on the breeze. And when he looked back to his mother, he was dipping below the surface. "What can I do, Mama?" Brightbill cried from the air. "Tell me what to do." "There is nothing more you can do," came Roz's gargling voice. "I'm so sorry." The young goose could only watch as the ocean dragged the robot down, down, down. Chapter 64 is called The Sea Creature. Ooh, I wonder if there is a sea creature in the ocean here that is going to come and save Roz from drowning. Brightbill hovered on the wind and watched his poor mother sinking into the depths. He could still see her body sparkling brightly against the darkness, but she was fading fast. The goose closed his eyes, hoping this was all a bad dream. He heard the distant horns of ships by the seaport. He heard buoys clanging in the harbor. He heard ocean waves churning and frothing, louder and louder and louder and louder. The goose opened his eyes and saw the ocean bulging upward. A giant sea creature was rising from the deep. It breached the surface and sent waves rolling away. The creature had a large mouth and long fins and a wide back that curved down into the water. There was a loud burst and mist shot up from a blowhole. As you might have guessed, reader, that giant creature was a whale. More of the whale emerged from the darkness until something sparkled in the sunlight. It was Roz. She was sprawled across the whale's back, wet, limp, and lifeless. And chapter 65 is called The Whale. This is the last chapter that we're going to be reading together today. And it looks like this chapter has included a lovely picture. And I can't wait to show it to you after reading these next few pages here. The whale swam along the surface of the ocean, keeping our robot safely above the water, gently moving her away from the rough waves. Brightbill couldn't believe what he was seeing. Once the shock wore off, he fluttered down to the whale's back and leaned over his mother. There was no life in her eyes or her body, so the goose did the only thing he could think of. Click! Roz's eyes began to glow. She uttered some human noises, and then, in the language of the animals, the robot said, "Oh, Brightbill, I am happy to see you." The goose squawked with joy and hugged his mother's face, but she didn't move. She couldn't move. The robot had lost the use of her limbs. There were a few tense minutes and a few nervous glances, but as the sun beat down and the wind rushed over her, Roz felt her body drying out. Slowly, gradually, power returned to her arms, then her legs, and then she sat up and hugged her son. Brightbill breathed a sigh of relief. "Mama, when you disappeared below the water, I thought you were gone forever." "So did I," said Roz. "As I sank deeper and deeper, the ocean squeezed my body tighter and tighter. I lost control of my legs and my arms. The last thing I remember was a huge shape swimming toward me, and then I automatically shut down." "That huge shape was a whale," squawked the goose. "We're riding on her back right now." A low moan rumbled up through the whale's body. She splashed the water with her fins and took long, wheezing breaths and sprayed mist high into the air. Roz paid close attention to the whale's behavior and understood what she was saying. The whale's name was Coral, and she was thrilled to meet our friends. She explained that a flock of geese had flown over the bay and regaled the coastal birds with the amazing story of the wild robot and her son, the goose. And here we have a picture of our new character here, Coral, the whale. As she's swimming through the ocean, she is carrying Roz and Brightbill on her back. The coastal birds shared the story with the fish and the dolphins and anyone who would listen. In time, the story spread to every creature in the bay. When Coral saw the robot rowing and the goose flying overhead, she knew it had to be Roz and Brightbill, so she swam behind them in case she could be helpful, and it was a good thing she did. As Coral ferried our friends across the bay, the waves grew smaller and the coastline grew larger. Houses poked out from the trees. Sunbathers relaxed on the rocks. Boats motored away from the piers. With so many humans around, Roz had to be careful. She lay flat against Coral's back while Brightbill flew ahead and scouted out the coastline. The goose directed the whale to a quiet, empty cove, and soon the robot was standing on dry land again. Roz asked if there was some way she could repay Coral for saving her life, but the whale was just happy to help. She winked one of her enormous eyes, and then she sank beneath the waves. Our friends marched inland, feeling lucky and grateful, but as they thought of the journey still to come, their good feelings gradually turned gloomy. Roz had nearly died crossing that bay. At some point, to get back to the island, she would have to cross an entire ocean. And that is the last of chapter 65, called The Whale. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. As I'm thinking back to the beginning of the first book in our series, The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, this isn't the only time where Roz is saved by another creature in the wilderness. If you are interested in interacting with the text in the comment section below, I would like you to try and think of other examples of when Roz was struggling to survive in the wilderness. Which animals or creatures were there to help save Roz? I want you to try and think of as many examples of animals that were there for Roz throughout her journey, her very treacherous journey for that matter. The next few chapters we will be reading together are chapters 66 through 70. I'll give you a sneak peek of the chapter title of chapter 66. It's called The New Land. As always, if you're interested in talking about the book in the comment section below, I would love to interact with you guys in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you for chapters 66 through 70 in the next video. Bye, friends!